I know. All right, we're going to have a call to order. It is 5:32. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yeah. Chair Markham,
Present?
Vice Chair Simmons,
Present.
Member Gardner,
Present.
Tree Committee Member Silva, and Tree Committee Member St. John.
Present.
All right.
Could I impose on one of my fellow committee members to do the Pledge of Allegiance for us? Volunteers? Thank you, Joy. All right, we're going to stand, have a moment of silence and do Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we will move on to agenda item number 4, special announcements. Does anybody on the committee or in the public have any special announcements they would like to make? All right, hearing none, we will move on to number 5, communications from the floor. This is any item that is not on the agenda that the public wishes to address. All right, hearing none, we will close that and we will move on to ex parte communications. Does anybody on the committee have any ex parte communications that they would like to make us aware of?
Yes, Chair, I have 2. And remember when it was probably a week ago, within the last 10 days after our field trip, I had a conversation with Council Member McCarthy about these tree removals, and he just expressed his interest in the project and how important it was, and his interest in the trees that are there, and then what would happen with, he's particularly interested and I don't know if I need to go into all this detail. Is this appropriate? The conversation, just the fact we did talk about the project and his concern that about it. So that was one. The second one was actually with Tree Committee member Silva. And we met at the library and the library book sale. It was just, we ran into each other and it was really just, he had questions about the process for communicating with staff and not wanting to violate Brown Act issues. And we just chatted about that for a while and I said it was appropriate to email staff. I didn't think it would be a problem to email everybody if he wanted us all to see the question at the same time. That was an option. And I counseled if you do that, you don't state your opinion because we probably should avoid that except in this meeting. But anyway, that was our conversation.
Through the chair, if I can just point of order. So if you are going to email, just email staff and then staff will answer the question, then give it back to the whole committee. That way there's no chance for a serial meeting. So feel free to like you did, Joey, where you emailed me your questions and then we responded with that supplemental information to the whole committee. That way you all have the answer at the same time. And then if you want to, you can also bring up your questions during the item that you have a question about. That way the public also gets the question as well. So.
Further point of clarification,
Sure.
Communications between committee members are generally not considered ex parte, is that correct?
That's an interesting, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, I believe not, but we'll
Yeah, I'll have to speak to.
We'll let you figure that out.
Yeah, I'll have to speak to our attorney about
All right,
that.
thank you. Any other ex parte communications which to be disclosed? Okay, all right, we will close that item and move on to number 7, our consent agenda. We have approval of 2 minutes from March 11th and April 30th. Are there any additions, corrections to those minutes that we are aware of? All right, I believe we have to do public comment, correct?
Sure.
All
Yeah.
right, we will do public comment on the consent agenda if there's any comments on that. Hearing none, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make motion.
Second? All right, let's do a vote. All in
Okay.
favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent agenda passes unanimously. We will move on into 8 public hearings. We have 2. A, opportunity area 3.2 and 4.3. Tree removal permit TR 25-003. Does staff have a presentation or we should discuss this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening, Tree Committee. My name is Guido. I'm the Community Development Director for the city. Just to get you oriented, so you have your original packet, which was sent out on Friday. And then we did get some follow-up questions from the committee, and we got a revised tree report from the applicant, and that was sent out as a supplemental, just a one-page memo. And so you all should have that same information. So tonight we're here to talk about a tree removal permit for phase 3 of the dunes, opportunity area site 3.2. Next slide. So the history of the permit so far, the tree permit was filed on March 7th. We endeavored to find a time that all the tree committee could be available. Since you guys normally don't meet quarterly, April 30th, we had our site visit. We walked the site together with the applicant and the arborist, got some detailed information on the general nature of the trees, the grading for phase 3 of the dunes. So May 9th, our staff report was released, and as indicated, there was some supplemental information provided on May 12th. So next slide. So this is just an aerial view. You can see the little green dot. That's where area 3.2 is. And that's generally the focus of the presentation for tonight. Next slide, please. And this, you have all of the information, but since it's a pretty meaty arborist report, I thought it'd be better just to put one slide that summarizes the general nature of the tree removal within area 3.2, which is the focus for today. Next slide. So in summary, there were about 116 trees identified within phase 3. 64 are outside of the tree permit area. There are 4 dead trees. 32 of those are needing to be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio. Next slide, please. And this is potentially for the commercial development at the site. I was told by Nick, who staffs the committee, that the tree committee likes to have a kind of general sense of how the tree permit fits within the overall potential development. Next slide. And so the supplemental information, I really appreciate the applicant working with staff, and after the site visit with the tree committee, they did sharpen their pencils. There was an opportunity to save an additional 2 trees, which really shows, wanting to work with the committee and the city, which is good. Next slide. Actually, if you go back. And then as part of the supplemental information provided to the committee, there was a question, and I believe it was from Commissioner Silva, about what is the nature of the trees on area 3.1, just to the north. And the answer is that we do have a development agreement with the dunes. That is not the focus of the tree permit for today. They do reserve the right to file for future potential development of the site. So that's next slide. Anytime we do any kind of action with a committee or a commission, we do have to show its connection to the general plan and general plan consistency. So you'll see that in the report, that there are 2 or 3 very specific policies within the general plan that talk about enhancing the retail and personal services opportunities within the city. And so by potentially removing the trees and making the site available for commercial development, we will be directly implementing the 2000 general plan. So next slide. So this is my recommendation slide. I won't read all of it. It just basically says, please incorporate by reference all of the recitals in the resolution. Recommend to the planning commission the removal of the trees. Replant at a 2-to-1 ratio. Follow the arborist reports that have been provided. And then the fifth bullet I added yesterday just to say that trees 712 and 752 shall be retained to the extent feasible. And I thought it was appropriate to add that language to the permit that, the applicant is showing goodwill to try to work with the city, but, the nature of construction is things come up and, they might have to do a little bit more grading than is anticipated. And so to the extent feasible seemed like reasonable language to add to the permit. But just to document if the trees have to be removed, we would ask for some type of report to document why the trees had to be removed. So that concludes my initial presentation, and happy to take questions, and the applicant also gets time to present today as well.
All right. Did the applicant wish to speak to this matter? And then we will go to public comment after.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all again. Doug McCardle with Shale Teams. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Thanks again for coming out to the site and due diligence you put in. And that's part of what I wanted to speak about tonight is just reiterating the due diligence that we put in on our side as well. We approach this with the intent to find ways to preserve as many as possible, as evidenced with the entire kind of Caltrans frontage there, not applying for any permits there, have no intent to take out any trees there. And then I thought Guido did a great job of summarizing, everything that we're asking, and also summarizing how we went back and took that second look. So we wanted to go back. Appreciate your perspective on that. We took an additional look, and this is a supplemental information that was provided in the packet. We took a deep dive into this. So first, Patrick, who you all met on the site, arborist from Denise Duffy and Associates, came out, re-examined the trees, took additional photos. I say additional because his initial report did cover a full examination of everything, including individualized photos, tags and such. But as Patrick went back, he went back with the eye of let's see what it would take to save these trees. And with that, he identified critical root zones and also drip line. And in this case, what he identified was, typically you would want to keep your grading outside of the drip line entirely, which would be the extent of the branches. But again, in this case, we have certain constraints. So what Patrick looked at was, as he identified the critical roots, and some of them you can see at the surface level, big roots kind of growing parallel to the ground. And so he identified the minimum that he felt that we could get as close to that tree. So the lengths included 17 feet, 12 feet, so on and so forth. But that didn't necessarily push it out to the drip line. So he identified those lengths. Okay, if that's the length, what would it take to save these? And that entailed building retaining walls. And so then we tried to take what those walls would look like and incorporate them on that supplemental site. And I appreciate Guido's wording that he put in that bullet point number 5 there. Ultimately, the plan will be to make a true, honest, good faith attempt to save those trees. I should identify it's the 2 southernmost that we found were possible viable candidates to save. The 2 northernmost, not so much, of the 4 additional ones that were identified. And so, we identified, okay, if we were to save them, what would it take? So we reconfigured the parking area slightly and showed it with retaining walls around it. Now, I was saying I appreciate Guido's wording there, because one of the things that Patrick pointed out is if we save those trees, they will require significant trimming and limbing up. raise, elevate the canopy quite a bit. In so doing, we would exceed the ANSI standards that require a permit because more than 25% of the trees be trimmed. So it's a scenario where we'd still be asking for the permit there, but we'd also be making the attempt to save the trees in accordance with building retaining walls and what that might look like. So we're all here to answer any questions you might have, but I just want to keep it succinct. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, we will open up for public comment first, and then we'll go to the committee. So anyone in the public would like to speak to this issue?
Anybody online?
Hearing none, I will open it up to the committee for questions and clarification.
I'm on page 22 of the new packet. It gives a spreadsheet of the phases, trees planted, proposed, existing trees remained or retained and required tree mitigation. What does existing trees retained mean in this table?
Thanks, Russ. So, hope gas to help provide protection. We asked our architects, our landscape architect, to go back and examine the entire development. And this essentially was us trying to show, again, it's just a effort that we're not approaching the project being fair.
Oh.
As it relates to this specific permit, we are constrained.
Sorry. We are constrained a little bit with the site, so we don't have the ability necessarily to overplant much beyond the required mitigation. But this sheet that you're referencing, page 22 of the new packet, that's what this was attempting to do, was show the overall. So your question was existing trees retained. Those would have been trees that those are trees that we figured out a way to save. Like we figured out a way to grade around, or to, perhaps incorporate into a park, or relocate. Looks like, yeah, there's not a separate column there. So there were a number of trees in each parcel that we came across that we figured out ways to save.
Okay, so that leads me to the question I'm trying to get at here.
Sure.
OP parcel 3.2, it clearly states 44 trees are retained. On our site plan for OP 3.2, all but 2 trees are marked to be removed. OP 3.1 has all kinds of trees marked to be saved, except Guido just answered that question previously, saying the developer does have the opportunity to come back at a later date and propose a new tree permit for future development for 3.1. So what I am trying to figure out is why the developer is claiming 44 trees are being retained for this permit when those trees are not in the site that is being developed, and then those trees that are said to be retained off-site can then be followed up with a permit later on to be removed in the future. And again, another concern to follow that up is if we're looking at roughly tree 734, 731, I think the civil engineer said that's about a 7-foot grade change in the future. And so we're gonna have a 7-foot wall, or do we have now 7 feet of grade change to mitigate against? And so there's likely very little chance that those trees that are proposed to be retained in 3.1 are gonna go too, because they're gonna be underground.
Yeah, I see where you're going. So, we can't speak to 3.1 obviously in this meeting. And I think what Guido had brought up was just standard protocol. But with that said, I'm looking at this, and the only thing I can tell you is that must be a typo. The 44 must need to be in the 3.1 column, not the 3.2 column, because it just doesn't make sense. You are reading the site plan correctly, relative to what we're asking to do. So I'm thinking that 44 is just in the wrong column, or in the wrong row, I should say. Yep.
I have a question. With regard to trees 712 and 753, I think we came up with. The two trees that are proposed for retention if possible. What, do you guys have experience doing these kinds of mitigations and how have they worked out in other projects, or make it a broader question of if Patrick wants to talk about it as well? Other projects, doesn't just have to be the Dunes project, but just curious about what you guys think of the potential.
Yeah. Plan, Patrick. Yeah, so actually, I'll jump in first ahead of Patrick because I have a quick answer to that is yes. On actually just very close to this on First Avenue, we did this exercise with same tree species where we limbed them up, considerably raised the canopy, and then we built retaining walls around them. And part of that actually, what we did illustrates a point I was making earlier was we engineer the retaining walls, and we've already looked at this with Andy Hunter, our civil engineer that you guys met on site. We engineer the retaining walls to basically have a pop out to allow some of these critical roots to grow. I think in some instances those roots were piped or they were burlap wrapped, but the retaining wall, again, since it is with inside the drip line, which, you know, normally you don't want to encroach onto that. But because of that, we had engineered gaps in the wall where the tree could go through. So yes, we do have experience, and right now they look amazing. I wish I had some photos to show you, but I'll let Patrick chime in if he has other experiences with that.
Yeah, I mean, Doug had a good point there, but the main thing with the Monterey cypress in our area is it is pretty resilient. And as long as we balance the impacts to the root zone in the canopy, they seem to survive and they do well. And I think between First Avenue and some of the experimental trees in Sea Haven, I've only seen success. There's one tree. It was a city project in the city park, which is in the dunes, but it's not Shea Holmes' project. One of those trees died, but that's the first one, large tree that I've seen die that had some trimming. I think it could use a lot more trimming. It's got some hangers and stuff. But where I'm going with this is as long as you balance the canopy after impacting that amount of roots, they seem to be okay. I know that USDA has Monterey cypress, I think, has a low tolerance for construction impacts, but I don't find that true at all in our location. That might be a general broad nursery stock tree that they're basing that on, but no, Monterey cypress is pretty dang resilient. Where else was I going with that? Oh, the roots that do pass through the walls, those will not serve a purpose for nutrients uptake. That's why we would want to trim so much. Those are mainly just there for structural integrity of the tree. And a lot of these trees that I looked at, the issue was the structure of the tree with the amount of impacts and the amount of trimming that I saw or foresaw. We would definitely unbalance those other two trees to the extent where I think they would die or fall over. That was my professional opinion. Yeah. I hope I answered that.
Yes, I just have a follow-up question, if that's okay. I don't want to hog the mic. Well, really two follow-ups. In the table that we're looking at in the packet on 22, and I know it's a potential mitigation is retain, remove, or move. And I know there are a number, it looks like there's a number of plants, and I'm generally aware that a number of plants have been moved on site. I'm wondering if any plants were considered for moving, any trees were considered for moving in this parcel.
Yeah, we've brought out a company called Mighty Movers Tree Movers to examine these trees and other trees throughout the site. Matter of fact, we did find trees northeast of the county building, kind of where we parked, where we're looking at, we're asking Mighty Movers to identify some of those. It might be potential relocations, but also those are some areas that we also graded around. But what we found on these was that we didn't find viable candidates for relocation. Couple of the constraints there was one in that area that we found. I actually think we may have looked at it that night. It was kind of in the center area. We can't relocate it right now because there are power lines that have to be underground. But that one we will relocate. That's not on 3.2 though, the parcel we're looking at. But yes, we've looked at that.
Thank you. This is just more a comment to staff, but I'd like the developers to hear it. If it's possible, Shea Holmes has been working at this for a long time, and there's a lot of things that have happened there, a lot of good things, a few things maybe that didn't work out very well. It would be maybe very instructive if maybe the tree committee could have a field trip to some of the successful spots where things have happened. Some of the trees have been moved, some of these retaining walls, just as for education, there's still going to be another few years going on to finish this project. It could be a valuable experience to the tree committee as education.
Absolutely. We can make that
So
happen.
just a
Yeah,
suggestion.
we can coordinate with Shea Holmes to make that happen. So.
I have a concern that you say you're doing retaining walls around how many trees? Just two.
trees.
And is there any reason why we can't do retaining walls from 70 all the way up to 714? It's quite hugging the line there. And I know everybody keeps saying grading and all that, but is there any reason why we can't have a retaining wall all along that line and save lots of trees? Because 50 trees is a lot of trees. I don't think saving 3 or 4 trees is that big of a deal. We've got a lot of trees here. And right there could be a retaining wall all along there to hold it back so that you could still do your development.
So you're asking why not a retaining wall along that whole stretch? Yeah. I think that there's some practicality concerns that we're running into, given the future use of the parcel, and overall aesthetics, right? And then final, the grading operation, I know you said you've heard of the grading, but, what happens is the trees wouldn't survive even with retaining walls throughout, from the standpoint of when we have to raise the site and import dirt, and to do that requires an over excavation. And so then once you've over excavated, we can't just lay the dirt. Then once you've
You're
over
gonna go down.
excavated, so many roots would get destroyed throughout that area, by virtue of the over excavation, just to raise the site. This kind of these couple that we show as a one-off, where you're building a retaining wall with some slots in it for roots to go through, that even those are borderline not feasible. But to do one along the whole stretch, I think would ultimately just be infeasible.
Even if you back it up.
Well,
Or
then,
would you have to back it up too?
yeah, you probably would have to. And then again, that will run into constraints with the site. So the practicality or feasibility of that just wouldn't play out from that point.
Okay, I have another question about the excavation of the site that's 2 blocks away. That
Mhm.
has 8 trees 9, 10, 11 trees you're also taking down, really only because you're using the soil from that site, right?
No, not only because that site has to be graded and delivered as well.
Is that what the tree? Okay.
Yeah. That was the one up above the county building there.
Right.
Um,
Right.
no, that's not I mean, that site would have to be graded regardless.
11 trees.
And as much as I hate to say it, the same, I guess, caveat still applies that Guido mentioned before, is ultimately when the purchaser of that site comes in, they have the ability to come up with their own site plan as they see fit. So we're trying to grade it, deliver a site that makes the most sense. we did find a way to save as many trees as possible in that area as well.
There's two. But there's a clump of 6 trees together, and my idea is a circle retaining wall to retain that group. They're not large trees, they're medium trees, but it is a group. It's 1942 through 1961. You want to look at mine? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, where you see 1942, 43, those
Yeah,
ones. Yeah.
and 61.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that
It is
whole
a
hill's
hill.
good.
If
that
I can
whole
just
hill
ask you to
comes out.
speak into the microphone when you
It's
speak.
usually a hill that you want. You want the hill for, most people want a hill so they have a view. You're not keeping the hill.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
it's,
the business park.
just a point of clarification, the opportunity 4.3 is not going to be homes. That's a potential medical use there. So they're under contract to deliver that property.
To,
Under the development agreement we've signed with them to make the site, and Doug Yount can speak to the contractual requirements, but they're under contract to deliver the site at a suitable feasibility for that medical use. So, yeah.
And just a point of clarification, I show 11 trees being saved there. 11.
oh, I have 2.
Yeah.
So
it's,
which ones are you saving?
1872, 1990, 1980.
1872 and 1987 is what I've got.
Yeah, and there's also 1988, 1989, 1990.
Yeah, these are all Xed out. Okay, so that,
Yeah, Doug, I think those are showing removal.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Those are removable. Yeah.
oh, see, they're showing.
Yeah.
Okay, I
The
apologize.
cypress aren't even in the.
Sorry.
Yeah.
They're not even in our area.
But I think instead
Oh,
of,
I
Commissioner Gardner, instead of focusing on the individual tree, I think part of the focus of the site visit was just explaining to the committee kind of the overall grading for the site and that they're moving the fill from 4.3 to 3.2. And unfortunately, that necessitates the removal of those trees. And so, that's the kind of the genesis behind showing all the sites and doing the site visit. So,
I have a comment for parcel 4.3, and we didn't go over there and look at it. But we had the report, and I'm not in favor of removing trees that we don't have to. But they all are fairly small trees. And some of them are pretty fast growing. I mean, they all have diameter breast heights are around 11, 10 inches, 12 inches. So they're not giant trees. They're not specimen trees. But that is, that just is a thought about the potential for, and that's why I was bringing up the question about, under what kind of conditions are trees considered for moving? Because if you're putting a building there, I don't think we have any choice to, but so anyway, that's just a comment to the committee more than anything.
Well, my question was about saving a group, and since you're preparing it for another potential
Yes.
project.
Yeah.
We don't know what the project size is or anything, that potentially an area could be saved if they weren't really building on that corner. That's my thought.
My understanding, and the Shade team can correct me, but all of 4.3 is designated for that potential medical use. And I think there are some feasibility studies going on in terms of even expanding to 4.2, but all of 4.3 is going to be for that medical use as of today. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's
And are these trees be replaced at the 2-to-1 ratio that are removed?
yes.
Yeah.
right, does the committee have any further questions? Okay. I had one question. I've only been on the committee for a couple of years and I have not seen where we agree to retain a tree and then there's some qualifying language that it might come back. So how common is that over the history that we'll do our best to
I
come
mean,
back?
I don't work as closely as Nick does with you guys, but I've done land development in multiple cities. It's not, not unheard of to put language in there that just, things happen in construction, dirt is moved, dead bodies are found, dirt is moved, and there's old sewer pipes. I mean, that's just the nature of development that, so a lot of permits have some caveats and, but it's completely at the behest of the committee if you don't want that in the permit. And if you want that to come back, then that's completely within the purview of the committee. So.
I think the language that Guido has put is quite appropriate. Without that language, then those trees are not in the removal permit. And so that forces them to come back for relief. They can't go forward. They're stuck, dead in the water until this committee meets again to give them a specific permit. Since the tree, they found out that, hey, it's impossible to salvage it. It's beyond salvage, so they have to come back. They have to remove it. But the impetus is back to this committee to give them a new permit.
That's not the way I read it. They wouldn't come back to us. They would come to.
Right, the way they've read it, they do not have to come back. But if we take Guido's language out, they do have to come back because they have no permit to remove it. And no clarification that in the event the arborist deems the tree unsalvageable at the point of ground construction, site prep, then they, with Guido's language, they have the fallback permit language, and they can remove it without coming back to the tree committee.
And I would point out to the committee that there is language currently in the municipal code about emergency tree removal permits that I've probably signed off on 9 or 10 since I've been here, that things happen, staff's alerted to something, there's already provisions in the code that says I have the discretion to request an emergency tree removal permit, but then we immediately come back to the tree committee and say, here are the circumstances, we had to remove it, and here's the reason why. So that's why the language was added on the recommendation to say, if the committee wants to add that language, and if the trees have to be removed, we would make them provide some documentation and we would come back to say, they had to be removed, this is the reason why, and we're not trying to not be transparent with the committee. So that's the genesis of the idea.
Okay, appreciate that.
This is on the rules of the University Village specific plans. UVSP. Tree standards calls for the preservation as many healthy Monterey cypress trees and oak trees as practicable. In accordance with the UVSP tree standards, Monterey cypress trees and oak trees that are in good or fair condition must be protected during construction and preserved whenever practicable. If relocation is possible, Monterey cypress and oak trees shall be removed by machinery, be immediately replanted to a new site, and be watered and fertilized. Existing healthy trees determined to be in good and fair condition that are removed shall be replaced on site as a ratio of two replacements to 1. You all know that. Just want everybody to know. Reiterate.
All right. Any further comment from the committee?
I have one more. This question, for Patrick. When your review of the site going back and on our field trip, did you see any other trees that warrant looking at in the way you looked at the ones that, I specified 4 trees that had the largest, diameter breast height. I looked at a couple of them. I was confused about which ones are which because the tags had gone missing. But anyway, I appreciate that you all were willing to do that. But I'm just wondering if any other trees caught your eye that, and this is also a bit of a comment for the committee. One thing I've noticed about the dunes development is that section there and to the north, you kind of go up there and it's a construction zone, but you see some of these trees that have been preserved and protected, and they're magnificent specimen trees. They're going to make the future community there, that the fact that those trees are stayed there. And so a lot of credit to everyone that's worked to make that happen. And don't want to forget all the work that Mike Owen did to really bring a lot of that out. But anyway, just the question is, did you see any other trees that maybe we didn't think about that you thought with your relook?
Of that size and with that structure, no. One of my favorite trees is the one with the tree house, that absolutely massive tree, but the poor thing is in decline and it's chunking off and half of its stems are falling. The poor thing is just ancient and it'll probably die and go in, or not die, but it'll go in retrenchment. And just, if we didn't touch it, it would just sit there forever. But that tree comes to mind, but there's no way to save that tree in that condition in my mind, due to the proximity of any construction. Everything else, due to the amount of fill, I had a really hard time because all these massive tree removals are massive cut and fill projects. It's not just a fun, let's design around a couple cool trees in a single family residence or something. Those are more fun projects for me to look at. These are massive, clear cut sort of grading plans that end up looking great down the road when they're replanted with, I'm going to say a plethora of different species instead of just Monterey cypress. I love Monterey cypress, but it will look nicer with an array of different species in my mind. Because I believe an urban forest with a diverse canopy is a lot healthier because you get a lot more variety of birds, a lot more disease prevention. I don't know. I don't know if I answered I kind of rambled there, but it was that big one with the tree house was pretty awesome. But I think its tolerance for construction is so low. There's no way for that one. Yeah. Yeah.
I have one other point. One other point is that the western border is where almost all of the trees are being removed. And that joins Highway 1's right of way, which if and there is, significant trees that remain on the Highway 1 right of way. So the eye appeal of this site after the construction is finished and these trees are removed and more trees are planted, even though they won't be very large and for years, but you will still have plenty of eye appeal. When you look in this direction, you probably won't miss the trees that are removed because the Highway 1 trees that remain will become more prominent. In my opinion.
Okay, thank you for that.
Not to cause a public argument, but I'm going to counter that statement really quick, only because the southwest corner of OP 3.2, there are very sparse trees on the Highway 1 property site. And the only ones on OP 3.2 are all being removed. And I'm having trouble finding the page of the replanting plan, but I'm fairly certain on that 3-to-1 graded slope, it called out for agave and low growing plant material. I could be wrong if anybody from Shea wants to correct me, but I don't think that we're going to have the same aesthetic, because the goal for that site would be to lure people in by looking at bright and shiny new cars, not existing trees.
Yeah, if Nick, if you want to pull up the draft site plan, just the. No, not that one. Don't want to send my presentation.
Oh, sure.
Bless you. Yeah, my response is, I think you're both right. So like I mentioned earlier, the Caltrans trees that are adjacent to Highway 1, I call it the Caltrans trees. We have no intent to do anything. We have no application there or anything. So that whole corridor will remain. Committee member Silva is correct in that, what the intent of the site, is obviously to capture some visual from the freeway, and the way they're intending to, the way that is going to play out is by virtue of raising the site. So that's why I'm saying you're both correct. The site will be raised, so they'll be able to see it, as people are driving by, but those trees are also still going to be there for a visual barrier too, and wind barrier too.
On your screen, I have the
Thank you.
preliminary
Site plan.
site plan.
So it looks like the chartreuse shaded area is agave and aloe species to be planted in that section. Where on our screen, top left corner. And so there'll be no trees retained and no visual break there. As a personal, am I allowed to share personal comments or opinions?
Of course.
Okay.
Yep.
In terms of mitigating, possibly just rethinking about the low growing plant material that is going to go in to be replaced to retain that hillside and whatnot. Maybe it might just be more of a site specific plant material that would be more appropriate for the site and more natural looking. Nothing against agaves and aloes in mass planting, but it will draw people's attention towards the cars, if that's the goal. But we live in extremely biodiverse chaparral and oak woodland communities all around the Fort Ord zone. And so you have lots of plants that are very tolerant of the climate, the salt, the wind, and they look good. And they're going to blend right into the surrounding areas of the Dunes project. Manzanita, ceanothus, things like that.
Where are you seeing the planting list? I've not seen anything but the trees.
On the far right.
So
Oh,
You have to scroll
Yeah,
right
yeah.
first.
okay.
Yeah, hi, Doug Yount with Shea Homes. Yeah, we'd love to hear your recommendations on that, just if you have personal recommendations relative to the planting materials. This is a preliminary planting plan relative to kind of give an idea. And we'd obviously go back to the landscape architect that would work with the applicant for the site to be able to say, maybe there's a more appropriate plant there or a plant type that makes more sense in that area. So we appreciate your suggestion.
A question to staff, if we were to take that up, I don't know that we could craft a recommendation on the spot right now, but how would we go about that?
If you want to pull up my recommendation slide, Nick. You could just add bullet 6 that says direct staff to work with the applicant to find. I don't want to put words in Commissioner Silva's mouth.
Plants like
Plant-
Manzanita, ceanothus, and
I
salvias.
think we're
And
talking about more California chaparral, native, coastal chaparral, native
Right.
plants and that sort of language.
Right. Yeah, however that could get
Okay,
crafted, we can
okay.
just add that to the recommendation slide.
I did have a follow-up question and I want to thank committee member Richard for reminding me because I forgot. About the Caltrans stroll, you know, there are a number of Monterey cypress there. They look to be maybe 15 to 20 years old, maybe. And they're looking a little beat down. And I'm just wondering, is there any way for Shea Homes to, or for us as a city to work with Caltrans and let's see if we can improve the plant health of the strip you do have planted, because they don't look all that great. I don't know.
I mean, we could certainly reach out. I mean, my experience with Caltrans is those permits take quite a long time. And so that would be something separate that we would, you know, not tied to the permit.
Less than
yeah,
less than a
so,
regulatory action and more like, hey, Caltrans, you know, we're trying to develop our community here. Could you make it look nicer? And maybe you've got a partner in Shea Homes to do something, or maybe, in fact, the predecessor to this group, the Tree and Garden Club, planted a lot of cypress in Caltrans land. We had permits from them to do the work, but volunteer kind of
Okay.
work. It's just a thought kind of for the committee. Maybe somebody in Shea Homes would think about it.
Yes, is my response.
Yeah.
We actually have thought about that already, and so we're totally open to that. To Guido's point, you know, we didn't pursue any kind of regulatory advancement there, but what we did discuss is if they let us, you know, by all means, we'd love to clean up some of that area to the best extent possible. Not remove, just clean.
Maybe we could remove the tea tree then. There is some basic species over there too.
Yeah,
We can approach.
yeah.
Just a question to staff on what number 6 would properly say, because we're going to be recommending to the planning commission.
so Nick can type out on the screen and we can put whatever you guys want in the
Yeah, I'm just
motion.
wondering if procedurally, if our ask is really to the planning commission for them to consider revising what they're going to approve. You know, they're the ones who are going to approve the landscaping, not us, right? So are they the people who would?
Yeah, I mean, you could craft it like, yeah, the 6 would be that the tree committee recommends that the planning commission review the landscaping plan
try to incorporate more native.
to try to incorporate, you know, more native species, especially at the southwest corner of the property.
Right, and some of that is because of that
So.
underpass there and right where it dips under.
Mhm.
So it's intentionally kept sparse there.
Or you could say entire western faces.
Yeah. That's, yeah, whatever the committee crafts, we can,
Well, we might have more expertise when this committee, and I don't know, that's what my comment was. I don't think we have time to craft specific recommendations tonight, but I'm wondering if we can, as part of a suggested motion, that we make recommendations through staff working with staff to make recommendations to planning commission or something like that.
yeah, that's completely appropriate for the committee.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's good. At least we have skin in the game, right? Go.
I have a question about tree 699, 697, 696. I was told that was a slope problem, but it is very close to the underpass. And it's already on a slope, I know that. Is there some way because it's on the very edge of the property, and one is like actually only partially on the property. But that could be saved.
Good questions. We had the same ones. We looked at it and the ultimate answer, why actually was, really came from the engineer, the civil engineer on this one. And it was more of a grading constraint and it was the over excavation, concern on those trees there along that.
What do you
that
mean
edge.
over?
So yeah, that's a good question. So what happens is, when we come in and we fill the site with the dirt,
Yeah.
prior to bringing the dirt in to fill, we have to dig down. And there's a stabilization component. So we have to over excavate. That's what I mean when I say over.
Right,
excavate.
right,
We have to
okay.
over excavate, dig down, stabilize, then bring in the dirt. And so it's through that process that those trees just wouldn't survive.
So Doug's bringing up a good point. When we did the site visit with Andy, he pointed out that there is some compaction of the dirt that has to happen. So I do recall during our site visit. So that's a good point that Andy brought up, that when they're compacting the dirt as part of the fill, it's not just bringing in the fill, but it's also
You have to go down.
go down and compact the dirt as well. So that's a really good point. So,
And
Yeah.
the roots would not survive that process.
right.
Correct.
All right.
But that's an area, designated area for planting new trees. So there will be a row there.
These are substantial trees, these right here.
Yeah,
They're big. So what's keeping you from stepping back 12 feet, doing the excavation back there and leaving that alone where those trees are?
I think that becomes like a practicality feasibility concern for developing the site.
It's not possible for some reason. I don't understand.
No, it's not possible because then the site is no longer feasible. It doesn't mathematically work. You have to have a certain area that's developable in order for them to
Yeah.
take the site.
All right, could you return to the slide where we had our almost?
I want to take it down so you didn't see me moving around.
You're hiding your work.
Yes.
All right, let's review this, please.
For item 6.
Yeah.
We had from Doug, we had a specific reference to that site. He just said the wet
Oh.
slope.
So do you want to work with staff or you want to craft it now?
Oh, I just mean this,
Oh, yeah.
this recommendation.
Oh, sure.
This is our
This
motion.
is our motion, to be
Right.
clear, right?
On the,
South in the southwest corner of the property.
thank you.
Does it have to be limited to Southwest or can
He
it be
had
the whole
mentioned
area?
wet slope, I thought. The planning plan, we talked about revising the plan.
Or the west, the westerly, the
But-
westerly.
It wasn't corner so much slope. I think it was. Yeah. Yeah.
True.
I was looking at the site plan though. They have that planting plan typical wrapped around 3 sides of the site.
Sure.
Do we have to limit ourselves to the west side or can we
No.
provide recommendation for the entire site?
There you go. Yeah.
We would want the input of the whole site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a large university villages planting list.
It's a good time to bring up these
I'll
questions.
landscape architect.
Yeah, so we can send you the list, their long list of plants that they have on their list. And you can work with staff to, when we bring this to the planning commission, we can incorporate it.
Calendar wise, when would that be?
Yeah, we're working through those issues, and number 6 should probably be rephrased, Nick, that
Sure.
it shouldn't say tree committee, it should be staff working with the applicant.
Well, we would get input from the tree committee.
No, they're directing us to work with the applicant and then bring that recommendation to
Oh.
the planning committee. That's my understanding of the motion.
Actually, I was
No.
recommending that the tree committee have a second bite at the apple, because we can't come up with an intelligent planning list tonight. But we could, I don't want to throw the planning commission under the bus, but I think there's probably more expertise amongst us than in the planning commission about what kind of plants would be suitable for revision of the planning plan or suggestions for the planning plan. So what I was trying to get at was, what's the mechanism for the tree committee passed tonight to help work on the future planning plan recommendations?
I mean, there's a couple different options. I personally, I mean, I've dealt with these type of motions before. You know, they have, Byron, is their landscape architect. He's really good. He's done the landscape art for the entire dunes. He really knows his stuff. It's probably better for you to make the recommendation for us to work with the applicant to craft something and then bring that to the commission, because ultimately the planning commission approves the tree removal permit and the landscaping plan. That's not necessarily the purview of the tree committee. So that would be my input to the committee, if you could just give us that discretion to work directly with Byron and the landscape architect. So, because ultimately the landscape plan is not something necessarily that the tree committee would.
Well, we have
Yeah,
actually
so-
made recommendations on other motions in the past, and with all due respect, we don't like the planning list that was come up with the first go, so.
We don't, isn't the tree committee function as staff to the planning commission?
The tree committee makes recommendations to the planning commission on a tree removal permit.
Oh, only on tree removal permits?
So that's why I was trying to politely say that it's probably better if we work with the applicant, because the landscape plan in relationship to the overall development plan, that's really the purview of the planning commission.
And we are
So-
free to attend planning commission.
Absolutely. You're absolutely welcome to attend. So
All right, thank you very much. Are we ready to entertain a motion? It may not be the final motion. So on your screen, you see for TR 25-003, all this 1 through 6, right? So that would be our motion. Well, it's still being modified, so wait a moment.
This is not the motion slide, is it?
It is.
this is the recommendation.
Yeah, if you look at our packet, it was 1 through 4. I'm sorry, 1 through 4, they added 5, and then we just added 6, right? So well, I think they were calling it out as a special case because of the possibility they won't be able to retain them. Right? Yeah.
They're special.
Yeah, they're called out as special. All right, committee have any additions, changes before we go to motion?
Do we need to specify the mechanism for trees 712 or 752, or that'll be buried in the recommendation packet?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
could you state that again?
Oh, just a question to the retain to the extent feasible. Does that need more specification, or does it can be sufficient with the information packet that goes along with this?
I mean, to support the committee and to be transparent, the second and third line of that just does say that, you know, if they cannot be retained, that they have to provide some type of documentation to me, asking for why. So
More about the specific mechanism by like the type of retaining wall and the strategy of retaining attempting to retain those trees.
no, I mean, that's something more that we would handle. So working with the applicant and the engineer, so.
Yeah, but pardon me, but we're actually voting on a motion where the mechanism of retention has been described to us, including the grading plans. So my question is, how do those details go along with this packet, or should we say something about the retaining wall as, you know, suggested by Shea Engineering and supported by Duffy and Associates?
That's completely within the committee's discretion. You can add that to your motion. That's fine.
Do you think it's necessary?
Personally, no, but
Yeah.
if you want to, that's totally up to you. So.
Well, I'm just wondering how it's done. So because the packet's very clear to us, but it doesn't say anything about it in our motion. That's really kind of the question.
Yeah. If you want to, that's totally fine. The site plan will continually be refined now that we know there's a possibility to save those trees. When I take the item to planning commission, I will absolutely make sure that that's on the final package of material given to the commission. But if the committee wants to add it, that's totally fine. You can just add a line that says, per the, draft site plan provided by the applicant per the revised arborist report dated May 12th,
Love it.
something to that effect.
I'll make a motion that we, once Nick stops typing, we pass this resolution with the 6 items as written.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Chair Markham.
Aye.
Vice Chair Simmons.
Aye.
Tree Committee Jackie Gardner.
Aye.
Tree Committee Silva.
Aye.
And Tree Committee St. John.
Aye.
Motion.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Aye.
I believe we are on to 8B.
Chair, I did want to just extend that if there is specific plant species, as the Shea Holmes mentioned, please email that to me and we'll work with the applicant. If there's we definitely appreciate you guys as volunteers and want to keep you guys roped into the process. So.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to go on to agenda item 8B, Art Village Tree Removal Permit TR 25-002. Does staff have a presentation on this item?
Very brief. Let me just bring it up really quickly. I'll be presenting this item today. Okay, so this is a tree removal permit for a tree that's within the Marina Arts Village. This is a City of Marina property that we are working with the Dunes and Shea Homes on. They're helping us, and this is coming to you because little background on this item. Back in April, the City Council authorized the demolition of the southern portion of the building, the Marina Arts Village. As some of you might be aware. And then on May 2nd, so just a few weeks ago, arborist Patrick Klobuchar came to the city and said one of the trees that's actually kind of sort of growing out of the concrete of the southern portion needs to be removed. It's a willow tree. Already sort of went over this. It's within the dune specific plan. This is the tree. All other trees for now are proposed to be retained. So only this one arroyo willow tree is being requested for removal. I will note that as part of the packet, there was a biologist went on site and made sure there's no birds within the tree. So there's no active nests. So here is the resolution for the tree committee. So this is only being asked for because this is being demolished, and so they need to remove this tree for the demolition, and the tree will be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio at a later date. This is staff's recommended motion for the tree committee. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'm going to turn it back to the chair.
And I would just point out, just to further clarify, this is a city council approved CIP project.
Correct.
That's already been voted on by the city council.
Yeah.
And there were probably 7 city council meetings about this and an on-site meeting. So in terms of the hierarchy, the council's already waited on this, and that, unfortunately this tree is collateral damage for a project that the council's already given clear direction to staff on. So.
And because it's a city project, we're not subject to the replacement rule. Is that
Oh,
correct?
we'll replace it 2-to-1.
2-to-1.
Mhm.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Cool. I tried to go see that tree, but it's an active construction zone. So
Yeah, I cannot actively visit the site, unfortunately.
Not going to happen. I zoomed in as far as I could with my phone.
Yeah.
All right. Does the applicant wish to present on this topic? Yeah.
Technically, the city is the applicant on this one, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a joint project.
Yeah.
So we are co-funding it. Nick summed it up. It's a quick presentation on this one. So the tree, it's a willow tree. It's growing out of the foundation. As of yesterday. The building structure itself's demoed. So the foundation's just waiting to be demoed for this tree.
That's right. At the city is the applicant. They're the
Yeah, yeah.
project coordinator.
And
Yes.
they're helping us with it, like Doug correctly informed that we're working together on this one, so. But it is a city of Marina site, so, yeah.
All right, we will open to public comment if there's anyone present who wishes to comment from the public. And seeing none, we will close public comment. Does the committee have any questions, comments?
I understand about that's one coming down. The other trees on the site, is there a future project that the other trees are gonna be saved in the future?
So it's a city of Marina site. Eventually the city plans to develop an arts village there. I don't know if you've gone to any meetings, but it's a pretty cool concept. And I'm not aware of any conceptual beyond just demoing the southern portion and making it the rest of the building be, preserved better. So right now there's no plans for the site. There's nothing funded. So once we get to that portion of it, we will come back, or the city council will decide on it. So it's nothing as of yet has been planned.
Any other comments from committee members? All right, could you put the motion slide back up again?
Sure.
All right, anyone on the committee willing to make a motion to approve TR 25-002?
A motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a roll call vote for these.
Sure. Chair Markham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Simmons,
Aye.
Tree Committee Member Gardner,
Aye.
Tree Committee Member Silva,
Aye.
and Tree Committee Member St. John.
Aye.
Okay.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We will close 8 down, move into action items 9, which we have none. We will move into 10A. This is a informational item, no decision to be made tonight. I'll start by saying this was started as a work project by the tree committee to try to take a look at the various ordinances that we have and do a comparison with other cities to see. Thank you, guys. To see, what people think about our tree ordinance, whether it can stay the same. Does this begin a process of, do we want to change anything? So first, we just wanted to present what we've looked up and kind of researched. And I think chairperson, our committee persons, myself and Simmons did some initial work, and then we gave it to staff to try to flesh that out a little bit further. And I think Nick's going to do a presentation for us on where that came out.
Yeah. This is an item that was continued from March 11th. Let me see. I don't think I didn't have a presentation plan for this. I will just say, let me just pull up the presentation.
Yeah,
Or
you had a comparison spreadsheet.
Comparison spreadsheet, I should say. Get rid of that. So, did you want to speak to this, Chair Markham, or you want me to break it down?
No, I can. I think this is largely the spreadsheet we started with.
Yeah,
these-
the only thing I changed really is I just differentiated that there was a little bit of a website comparison, and then there was an ordinance comparison, just to sort of group them together for clarity in your review. So I didn't edit any of the actual review that you did of the other ordinances. I just kept it as is.
Right.
And then yeah.
Yeah, so I did, I think 3 other cities. I tried to do San Francisco, but I ran out of time. So these are the ones that we looked at, which are pretty much our peninsula, Monterey Bay nearby cities for comparison. And just try to make some contrasting, things of, what do we have? What do they have? In general, Pacific Grove is probably the most expansive and most restrictive of the cities nearby. And they have an actual, because they have urban forest as a big part of their identity, have canopy coverage goals that they have established. That's no other cities do that. They do have a recommended tree list. They have tree giveaways. Oh, they do tree giveaways because when I lived there, they were giving them away. So that's an error there.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
And then I guess you can go through the list because it was basically of these ordinance items. I think we tracked them reasonably well. Which body was responsible for responding to objections to decisions and things like that may have differed a little bit. But the most notable difference between Marina and the rest of our peer cities is that we have no ordinances to speak of on residential zoning. So, if a property owner wishes to remove any tree because they don't like it or whatever, they can without having to go through a process. And that we don't really have a notion as PG does of what they would consider, they call them almost like heritage trees. I forget their term, but they have Monterey cypress and Monterey pine as one that if you remove them, even if they're severely diseased or dead, you still have to replace them. So that was a difference between us and them. So these were just things of, comparisons to ourselves and other things. And would we want to advise staff to entertain, researching changes or things to our R1 zoning? I did a little bit of just asking people what was the reason why, and there was sort of an attitude of, don't mess with the property owner's property back when the original ordinances were done. That for here, right? Our ordinances that was sort of the reason why, residential properties were excluded from ordinance restrictions. So anyway, these are the categories I found and just kind of listed those. So I don't know if we want to take the time to read it here, probably not, but if there's any discussion on this that we have about what people think about our current ordinances in comparison to our peer cities, we are open to discuss that.
Yeah, and sorry, this is kind of slower on my mind because I was fresher when I wrote this
It's November,
2-3
right?
months ago. But staff has, whenever we go through our normal course of business, we always maintain a list of things we want to change for the different ordinances. And so staff in the staff report does mention 5 different areas where we could see improvement for the tree ordinance. And one of those is emergency tree removals does not require replacements. And so we had this issue come up at Planning Commission before the tree committee was reformed, where we wrote one for a site where we didn't require them to put replacements. And one of the planning commissioners correctly pointed out that they should always have replacement trees. So that was the only time we didn't. Of the other 5 or 6 that we've done since I've been here, we've always required 2-to-1 replacement for emergency tree removals. And we're currently working on an emergency. We wrote a letter this week, which just wasn't enough time to bring it to you guys. I'll bring it next time, but there's been another tree that's in decline and in an area where it could hurt people if it fell or damage stuff. So, but yeah, just making it clear that if you remove a tree for an emergency, that you replace it 2-to-1 or something. So that's one thing that we brought up. And then expanding the exemption for public agencies. So a lot, we find it, for instance, this recent tree removal where it's a city-owned property, our current exemptions don't cover that exemption for that. So looking at maybe expanding a little bit for that kind of situation, and a situation where the city is removing trees for city reasons, just as an option. I know a lot of other cities, it's an awkward thing for the city to say, we as staff are requesting to remove a tree for the city. It's just an odd situation a little bit. And then we also have preservation and protection provisions. So have clearer protection standards, prevent unnecessary removals and ensure better tree management. So I definitely think our ordinance could be clearer. I would like to have some language in there about pruning. A lot of other cities have really clear, if you prune a limb like this and it damages it like this, then that's considered a removal. I know City of Monterey has that kind of language. So making clearer language about, pruning, I wouldn't recommend making a permit requirement for that. I don't want to be writing. I mean, we have very small staff, so to be mindful of that. And we don't have a city arborist. I think every city that you have in your
Has one.
has a city arborist or multiple city arborists. And then this isn't on my list, but we don't have an administrative tree removal permit. So there's an administrative permit, so a staff level tree removal permit. So
Were you just talking about that? That's what you just.
yeah, I mean, so you could do an administrative tree removal permit where we require what happens in other cities really is they have an arborist. The arborist acts like the tree committee. They decide this tree saved, this tree is removed. And they just say these trees are gonna be removed. In this city, it's a little different. I've only worked for one other public agency, and that agency had one protected tree, and that was oak trees. And then street trees, and you couldn't touch a street tree. This city operates very differently than that city. And so every city is very kind of unique, and they have their own rules for a reason. So our rules, I think you guys know the history of the rules. They came about because Mike Owen and the Marina Tree and Garden Club wanted it was originally in a different section of the code. It was like a public works code before. So it has an interesting history of how it finally got into the planning code, zoning code, and now how it's actually done, which is interesting. But yeah, I think there is some room for improvement. And then the final one in here is exemption. If you're going to focus more on the trees that the community cares about, which I'm guessing are cypress trees and coastal live oaks, possibly pine trees, but that's sort of I think is a discussion for this body to discuss the merits of what you want to put on there. I would also recommend maybe a nuisance tree list. I know that Pacific Groves has nuisance trees. I've heard from Patrick that I'm not an expert on trees, so I have to defer to the experts, but I've heard from multiple arborists that there's trees like acacia that are, invasive. They have, pollen that are, they're not
Fall over easy.
they fall over easy. So these trees, we're one of the only, a lot of arborists will come to me and say, well, it's just a eucalyptus. I'm like, whoa, that's an important tree in Marina. We care about eucalyptus trees, but so every city is different. And I think that's where you guys come in and make a recommendation to what you want us to work on. And if you have more areas you see you want to add to or focus on, this is part of this discussion. So, yeah.
Well, my suggestion is we need to work on this some more, but this would be a good time to hear from other committee members about what we have so far. And honestly, I haven't worked on myself on this as much as I had wanted to when we first started talking about this. But I do think I see this as kind of a process maybe to take a year or so thinking about this, figuring stuff out, and maybe our goal might be to work towards proposing a new ordinance in this term, potentially. The thought. While I'm talking about this stuff, at some point we may want to revisit our work plan and renew it or revise it or both. And everyone except Joey was part of the first work plan, but we may want to agendize that for a future meeting to review the work plan.
Yeah, I mean, we have this item, and then we also have the recommended tree list revisions. So those are the two.
We may want to add to it too. We
Yeah.
may want to, there's something else that we might want to do. So
Yeah.
that'd be my recommendation is that I don't know, do we make a motion to do this? Is just
Well,
discussion.
you can only make a motion for what's on the
Yeah,
agenda.
it's not on
So-
the agenda.
Yes.
So you
So
can direct
it's just
staff to
a-
bring this back and we can put it on the agenda.
Suggestion that we open up the work plan for revise and renew. And including the idea of bringing new topics. If there are any, we were trying to keep it something within a manageable amount of things to do in the time we have, but, I think we could think about new things and maybe.
So there is one item that my colleague brought up to me this week and more recently. We will have an item come before you soon, which will be 100% or 99% replacement in lieu fees. You saw this come before you with MST site. And this is something that I will probably end up taking on, which is adopting a public tree planting plan. So that's just sort of codifying a plan for tree planting in the city of Marina and what the fee is for in lieu fee. So that way it's standardized. So that way we have this in place. What we've had so far is we get an estimate from Public Works. Public Works gives this estimate to the developer before we bring it to a body, and then they agree on that fee, and then they pay that fee. But what the typical thing you do is you go to city council, you adopt this, a city adopted public tree planting plan. That's actually in the code under compensation plan. So this is something that I will end up working on. So if you want, you can also incorporate that into work plan, or, I can bring it back as an item if you guys want to bring that kind of thing back as an item, but. So it would be a citywide adopted public tree planting plan for the city planting. So when a developer or a proposed project comes before us of any kind and they want to cut down trees and they can't put them on the site for whatever reason, or they don't want to put them on the site, they can, under our ordinance, they can pay an in lieu fee, right, for the 2-to-1 replacement. So if they have to replant 100 trees, they would have to pay us 100 trees times whatever it costs to plant a tree to buy the tree, plant the tree, and water it until it matures into a live tree. In order to do that, you have to have the citywide planting plan. We are planting trees, for instance, with the Del Monte Boulevard project, but we don't have, this is something that often is done by Public Works. So it would be me, working with Public Works on this. So if we start working on this, we could have a joint meeting between the tree committee and the Public Works Commission, for instance, to go through this when we get closer to it.
Yeah.
And then that would go before the city council, so we could have stuff like that. But it would be a process where, it wouldn't be a right away, but this is something where, anyway, I'm just bring it before you because I know this is something that I think is important for the committee.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. We would like to be involved with that.
Okay.
I'm sure we would be.
Sounds good.
So as far as work plan items, could you provide us with the document you were talking about where the staff had made notations about what they would change or recommend?
Oh, it's just in the staff report.
Oh, okay, it's staff report.
Sorry, I was just reading off of these. Right
Oh,
here.
okay.
So yeah, emergency tree removal permits, exemptions for public agencies, tree preservation and protection provisions,
I missed that. Thank you.
harvest report
Yeah.
requirements, and then exceptions for certain trees.
Right. Okay, thank you. So that's complete.
Yeah, that's on page 62 of your packet and 63.
Thank you.
Oh, that's why I didn't see it. I'm missing 63.
Oh no, do you want mine?
I think that may be my problem.
Yeah.
Well, it's on the screen.
It's on the screen. We got it now. It's online too. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all on the website, on 2 places, because I did
Okay.
it.
All right,
Yeah.
cool. We will take that into consideration. All right, so for work plan items, I guess we should probably, I don't know if this becomes a new work plan item or just a continuation of the existing one. What do you?
Well, we were talking about agendizing discussion about the work plan in the next meeting.
Okay, all right. That sounds reasonable.
Work plan for the tree,
What
tree
for us,
committee.
Yeah, what is our work plan going forward?
for the tree list.
Tree
For the
list is
tree
on it.
committee.
Yeah.
What's item, the work plan, the work, remember we had a work plan with the items that we wanted to work on? So what do we want to do in the next 2 years? And I'm sure we'd want to finish the items that are already on there. But I think we need at least to tell Joey about it because he
Yeah.
wasn't involved.
Yeah.
And then maybe we want to add to it.
Did you want to add an action item to that where you can nominate and add people to the work plan? So like, let's say somebody wants to step down from one of the work plans and someone wants to step in, like, let's say Joey, for instance, who's new, wants to be part of the recommended tree list for the city of Marina, and someone wants to step down. Did you want to add that as an action item or just leave it as discussion item and we can bring it back at a later time?
I'd like an action item personally, just
Okay.
we make progress and it's in the
Well,
ground.
the action item, I think,
Yeah.
would be to revise, review, including work plan members and potentially adding new items.
Something I forgot to mention is, I'd like to acknowledge that we did receive an email from Sherry Adler. I think you all have it now, regarding this particular topic of our tree ordinances, although she didn't specifically do that, but it raises many of the things we may wish to consider as part of that. So I just want to acknowledge that we did receive that, and we are going to factor that into our forward-looking plans.
That actually is my question. How do we, when things like this come in, how do we address them? Do we discuss here or?
Every committee does it differently. Some read it into the record, some just note. This one came at 4:13 PM. So, and this is a discussion item. So, I might, because this person's reached out, when we have this item come before us again, I will let them know via email. Hey, you had a comment on this item. If you want to speak to this item, it's coming up on this date. So if I know people are interested in something, I try to let them know. But yeah, this is something for you guys. This is for you guys to read. This is a discussion item, so you're not making an action right now, but this is just notes. This is a note from this member of the public that I spoke to on the phone and had her email me this.
Well, she has 8 recommendations and some of them are fairly like cypress trees, number 8, are untouchable. I don't think.
Yeah, that's
A noble.
it's a noble, yeah.
Object.
They're not indigenous to here. either.
Right.
They're from the area.
Right.
Indigenous to this
Thinks they are
region. Okay.
Yeah, I just think, we
I
can
don't know
factor
how
this.
large our region is.
Yeah, this is just public comment. So
Yeah.
like any public comment, thank you for your comment. We will review it.
Well, this person might be referring to the thing we were just talking about, is that some cities have protected species.
They do, yeah.
Right, that was
So,
what I was gonna
yeah.
mention.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think it's a reasonable sentiment, whether
Yeah.
we decide to go with it or not, that's something
Yeah.
else, but.
Yeah.
Replacement of a species.
No, that,
There's-
well, I mean, in Pacific Grove, for example, you have to go to great lengths to remove an oak tree or a Monterey cypress.
We
Right.
have a
Yeah.
protected tree list, which we don't have, that
Yeah.
if it's one of the protected trees, there's a lot more stuff you have to do, like you must replace, even if it's dead. You have to have an arborist come and give us a certification of its health. So there's a process that they go through for the protected trees, which we do not
And
do.
you have to have 5 tree committee meetings instead of just one, and, extra
They'd rather
bureaucracy.
make the hospital or the car, people work around the tree. You've seen that so many times.
Yeah.
The house has to be built around a tree.
Mhm.
So.
Their process is, we come in fairly late.
Yeah.
They do stuff earlier, so maybe that's a topic of
We've talked
discussion.
about this in the past, since we're talking about things to put on our list, is increasing the fine for taking down trees.
Mhm.
What is it, $100 now, $200?
So we don't have a fine. So, sorry, I brought this to you as an informational item at one point in the past.
Yeah.
And
You did.
we don't have a fine specifically. We have a requirement where if someone cuts down a tree without a permit, this is actually, will lead to my next item, which is to bring up the email that we all received. Don't let me forget. But, so if someone cuts down a tree for a tree that's just naturally growing on a site, so for instance, if the dunes accidentally cuts down a tree that's scheduled for removal without a permit, they have to replace that tree at a 7-to-1 ratio or 6-to-1 ratio. So I think the code says 3 times the replacement ratio. So rather than 2 trees, they replant 6 trees.
Of the same species.
It just says 6 of those trees. So
It's actually happened, hasn't it?
it has, yes.
Yeah. With
And
which
so,
it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has happened in the past. In situations where, so it's a little bit, yeah, so in situations where someone like damages a tree and then it dies over, eventually, we also have a remedy for that. We could fine them through our admin citations, which is starting at $100 if they don't fix the violation. So for instance, let's say someone cuts down a tree or damages a tree without a permit, and then it dies. We can say, you have to replant this, 6-to-1 ratio, or pay the in lieu fee. If they don't do that, then we could fine them $100 a day for as long as they don't make that correction. So for instance, you got an email recently. This is slightly different because the trees that were removed on the site on Del Monte were not native. They're not naturally growing trees. Those trees were planted with a landscaping plan. And under the tree ordinance, yeah,
Bagel and.
yeah. When trees are planted as part of a landscaping plan, under the tree preservation and protection ordinance, it says it's an exemption where that's a staff level, that's a approval by community development director to change the landscaping plans. So I reached out to the owner, and then I've been put in touch with the new tenant of that site about their requirements that they need to replant trees on site and redo their landscaping plan. So I spoke with them this week. I'll continue to follow up with them. They're going to submit a new landscaping plan. So that's a little bit different. But if they didn't submit a landscaping plan, then we can cite them $100 a day. And if they don't respond to the first citation, we can increase that to $200 a day. If they don't respond to that citation, we can increase it to $500 a day. So hypothetically, we could find someone $100,000 for not replanting trees. Are we going to do that? Probably not, because most people that cut down trees without a permit come into compliance, either planting trees or redoing their landscaping plans and then planting trees. So our goal as staff is compliance, which is planting the trees to replace how they violated the ordinance. So, and there has been situations, for instance, the dunes, where they've cut down trees and they've worked out a situation where they were going to they had tree removal permits for certain trees, and then they ended up keeping them. And so, as requested by, I think it was Greg requested to do a site visit, that would be something where we would show, here are these 5 trees that were going to be cut down, but then there's this 15-foot tall retaining wall that they built to keep those trees. So, so that's the way it works in Marina. It's a little bit different. We could explore adding a fine. So for instance, in City of Monterey, if you cut down a tree in your backyard without a permit, they fine you $1,000, and they fine the person who cuts down the tree, whatever their company is, $1,000 as well. So it's a little different here, where we don't have a permit for R1 or single family residences. So, and that's something that the arborist does. So it's a little different in other cities, the way they do it. I think it's similar in Pacific Grove as well.
Does that give a suggestion?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So if we were to do that and we actually came up with ordinance changes we would recommend, what is that process? Do we go to the city council? Does that go through planning commission? And because we're kind of a sub thing.
So the process for any sort of ordinance is, if you guys were not involved, it would just be staff has maybe a city council member, or we'll go with you guys. So you guys could make a recommendation to staff. I would draft changes to the tree ordinance. You guys would review that at a meeting, and then you would recommend it to the planning commission, who would then recommend it to the city council for adoption. So
it's a 3-step process.
It'd be a 3-step process. Normally it just goes from me to the planning commission and then the city council, or the public works commission, if it's a public works code, or whatever it goes to. So yeah, it's a 3-step process. So when you guys are ready to make an action on, these are items we want to see brought before us as a recommendation to the planning commission, you can bring that to staff. And then just keep in mind, any change you make, you present, staff will review it in terms of staffing and budget. So that all has to go through my director as well, Guido, who was here earlier.
Okay.
So, yeah.
We just made Guido happy because we went along with him. So.
We
but
gave him
let's-
power.
Let's butter up Guido whenever we, I'm just joking. No, it's nice to get work with different, I'm joking, but it's nice to work. For some reason, I thought it was Allison and Nick for everything, but I learned that they have specific projects, so.
Allison helps me on these because this is my first committee I've ever chaired or staffed. So she's helped me to make sure I understand the Brown rules and all that stuff. So she's been helping me for the first couple of years. She's actually on vacation today, which is why she's not here.
Oh, okay.
But
No.
I think she'll continue to help me
But I thought.
as long as she's with the
you
city.
Suggested that it depends on whose project it is.
That as well,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
in the beginning, she was here even when she didn't have an item. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Nick, I have a couple questions just to still learning the ropes on
Yeah.
how this works. Going back to our motion for Shay,
Uh-huh.
if that turned out to be a no vote on our part, does that mean that
That would be it. The tree committee would recommend denial. So if you voted no, your motion failed, then that would mean that the tree committee would recommend denial to the planning commission.
oh, it's just a recommendation? It has nothing to do with if they acquire the permit or not.
Correct.
Okay, so the planning commission is the city forester in this regard. They are making the final decision, or is city staff making the final decision?
The planning commission is going to make the action. Yeah. So yeah,
Bumps up to the city council.
this will not. This will just go to the planning commission. So if there's a project where they're going to do design review, for instance, this is happening. So that often happens in housing projects, whether it's design review or multifamily or whatever commercial projects. If there's design review and part of that is tree removal, then that would go to the next body. So in this case, it's the planning commission. If there's no larger permit besides a tree removal permit, then it just goes to as a recommendation to the community development director. So
Eventually, it would
yeah,
wind, if the developer rejected further to planning commission, it could
Right.
wind up at city council.
right. Or someone appealed it. Yeah, then
Yeah.
it could go to. Mhm.
Okay, but ours is simply a recommendation.
Correct.
Okay,
On all your motions.
so we
They're all
don't feel bad about saying no to everything, then I guess is what I'm getting at from you. No, my next question is, kind of was alluded to earlier. We're late in the game. When Doug was up here and Jackie was asking specifically why
Uh-huh.
can't the retaining wall be moved back? And he says, it's just feasibly not possible. I think he left out the word of financially.
Yeah,
They cannot
yeah, I would just
satisfy.
caution you to not speak too much about that item that's already been closed.
Okay,
So that's part of the Brown Act, and that the applicant's gone, the item's been decided, so now you can't really speak about that item. I don't mind answering technical questions, but that item's been closed. I can answer questions offline, but yeah, when you're at the podium, everything you're saying is recorded and all your, so, yeah.
I think generally we had discussed, probably when we reformed, that, finding ways to get involved earlier in the planning process was something we wanted to look into. So that
Yeah.
might factor into action items or work items of how
Yeah,
would we do that, right?
right, yeah. So
Yeah.
bringing it back to the discussion item at hand,
Okay,
that's, yeah, so,
not talking specifically about that,
right, there you go.
but
There you go.
in terms of hypothetically, it seems as if a developer is coming to us with already drawn out plans. Lots of funding have been dumped into the planning and construction documentation of a future site. And then to come to us now and say, we'd really like to do this, but your trees are in the way and we need to get them removed, rather than earlier on, if 52 trees are being removed. I mean, there was no sharpening of, sorry, that's another term, but anyways, a lot of trees could be removed in a site. And, to me as an individual making a decision, it seems like there's a lot of pressure not to hold up progress on a substantial project. But at the same token, we're so late into the game that it's like when nothing
Yeah.
can be done now to change it because this is how plans have been drawn, that's kind of what I'm getting at here is this.
Yeah, I will say just, I have one point. There's three major developments in Marina that were approved in 2004 and 2008. And those have development agreements, so they're entitled to their rights to develop those projects. So that's something that's authorized by the city council, which is above you guys, right? So you can't, it's similar to like how I, as a staff person, can't override state law, right? I have to follow, if state says everybody can build ADUs in their backyard, everyone can build ADUs in their backyard. I have no say in that, right? So you're in a similar situation with this project with these types of projects where you guys are following after the footsteps of a development agreement. And in some cases, they get tree removal permits ahead of time, but they're rough and they're for a fraction of the trees actually need to be cut down. So they might come back and say, we need to cut down, when this was entitled in 2005 or 2004, we got a tree removal permit for 1,000 trees and we need to cut down 1,200 trees. This will happen, but it is a unique situation. I can't speak to what happened in 2004 and 2008. And this is an opportunity site, so this is something that came before us, but really what happens is staff works with the applicant, brings before a project to the tree committee. So before your time, for instance, MST, another applicant came with a project and said, we looked through this as much best we could, and we originally were going to cut down 70 trees, for instance, just hypothetically, but now we're only cutting down 55, right? Because they found 15 they could save. And that was an item where the tree committee continued the item, which is totally within your right to continue an item and look at it further. They did it. You all did a site visit and looked at it in greater detail. And eventually you still had the same recommendation as what was originally proposed, because you realized that there was no, because of the facts of that permit. But so you can continue items, you can do what we did here or what you did here, where you looked at 2 potential saves, so you can work within those margins. So, and you can recommend denial, those are all things you can vote on, right?
I might comment on Joyce. That's the same feeling I had. This, I guess, is my third term on the tree committee. It was, well, I don't want to get into what applicant it was. You can probably just guess, but there was the case that Nick was bringing up. I should maybe look at you. It's just weird with the microphone and but the case was our grading plan changed now that we're getting into the fine details. And so the tree removal permit came to us. And this was no small gauge pine or ratty looking cypress that was going to die anyway. This was a significant, with a large trunk, old growth coastal live oak that and not just one, but several. But there was one in particular that was magnificent. And we felt like our hands were tied. And we tried to do what we did a little bit tonight, was like, could you do something different here and do something that? And so I think we can work around margins. And another development last term, we actually ended up by just kind of working with the developer. We had an opportunity, and it was a weird meeting because we were much closer to them and we were breaking some of the rules by talking too much. But we ended up saving 7 or 8 older oaks just by saying, can you change your plan? So we have I've seen us less a regulatory body and more as a potentially persuasive body. Like, we can be persuasive. And that goes to my comment about my thinking about the ordinance is, can we make the ordinance such that it's not all regulatory, but it kind of resets the thinking about trees in the urban forest in a town like Marina, even if a lot of developments already been decided. Going forward, there may be other projects, but they would have some influence on what happens to the urban canopy in Marina and kind of upfront, like, we're gonna have developmental plans that make it a priority to preserve trees. And it's not going to be grading plan is what we have to kind of abide by, because that's the original permit was agreed that way, is the planners and the city staff and everybody will upfront build those kind of things into the planning.
Mhm.
And I don't know quite know how we fit that into the ordinance, but that's one of my visions for what we might be able to do as a committee to kind of work those kinds of things into the future once we get these things going. And I think we're already doing it a little bit. I mean, we're asking good questions and we're
Mhm.
trying to work with developers. These developers, and I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about how they were, but is this going, this isn't about the decision, it's just their presence. You know, I think they get it. I think they want to try to work with us to figure out what we can do within the limits of everyone. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. I mean, it could be an ordinance thing. We could go back and look at the development lists, because I think most of the cities had what their planning process is sort of codified in their ordinance. So we might want to take a look at that when we
Okay.
review ordinances. So
Yeah,
that would be
we
good.
should.
All right, are we complete with discussion on this item?
Mhm.
All right, so I think the only pseudo action item out of this is that we will bring back an actionable item in the next meeting to discuss our work plan. And with that, I will move to 11. We did have correspondence. I believe we already addressed those.
Mhm.
We had two. We had an email about the tree removal on Del Monte, and then we had
Yep.
this letter about potential ordinance stuff. All right, with that, I believe we are done unless there's any other stuff, but I don't think we can because they're not agendized. So I will move to adjourn at 7:24 PM. Any objections? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.